So we're going to give it like 1 more minute. This thing is
This is a routing meeting.
Okay, once Jim is up here, we're going to get started. You ready? Okay, so let's get started here. So welcome everybody. You ended up in the routing area open meeting. I hope that was your intention. If not, bad luck. You have to listen to us. You're stuck with us. So for the next hour, before we step into other things, first we have the note well, which means like anything you say and do here is seen as part of the IETF and all the patents and all the rights and all those things. On top of that, we also have the note really well, which means be polite to each other. If you feel harassed and harassed, sorry for my bad Flanglish here, then we have ways to to accommodate that and to help you resolve that also. So we do have like certain instances here to take care of that. This is for the online people. This thing is being recorded online also. People actually are online. Please mute your video and your audio to avoid like any occasional misunderstandings here in the room, because both your voice or your face will be on the screen here in very big items here. We have some resources. So we do have an agenda. I hope you have tested certain things here. So I think we're going to be ready now. So the agenda we have here. So maybe you want to take over,
sure.
Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. So a reasonably packed and interesting agenda, I think. But before we start, it's kind of bittersweet day, at least for me, losing a really good AD today, John Scudder. Very much enjoyed working with John, but also to welcome Ketan to the team. And as a thank you, John, from the entire area, Yingxing has something for you. So I don't know whether you could step over there and grab that. Okay, so
well, thanks, John, for serving as the routing AD. We prepared a poster and with a lot of people signed on it yet, but still people who hasn't signed on it yet. So if you want to sign, find John after the meeting. You still have your opportunity, and also a small gift to say thank you.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. It's really been, it's an overused expression, but it has been a genuine honor and privilege to be able to serve you. And, I'm looking forward to continuing to do whatever I can in the area. Also, welcome, Ketan. And, before you realize what you've gotten yourself into, I have something for you. Don't hesitate to use it.
Thank you.
Show everybody.
Just in case he needs it.
Perfect.
Cheers.
All right, thank you. So we're going to get a routing directorate report. We felt that it's been a while, and we're very grateful for all the directorate reviews that we get, and we know it takes a lot of time and effort from people. So we're going to get that update. Ketan is going to give a brief overview on some ideas he has for improving the quality of the documents in the area. So we want to put some focus on that. And then Dhruv is going to give us an update on what's been happening in the IAB. And then finally, Jeff is going to give us lessons learned from Over Quick. And then we'll have an open mic for anything that the folks would like to bring up. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to the first. Oh, we have the working group assignments. You're right. Oh, yes, I forgot. Yes, indeed. So not much to show here other than Ketan will be taking on all of John's working groups, existing ones, and he's very kindly, kind of threw it at him. He's going to be taking LSVR from me. But aside from that, everything remains as is, as you can see on the chart here. Okay, so first presenter is where, there you are. Come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone.
There's a clicker.
Yeah.
Oh, you need that slide. Yeah, clicker's working, but
Oh, sorry.
Anybody here know how to run a meeting? Is there a working group here?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Here is the routing area directorate report. It's so small.
yeah, it is a little small.
Yeah, thank you. Since IETF 114th, we have had 6 new members join us. Welcome. And at present, the RTG Directorate is a panel of 49 routing area experts appointed by 8 area directors. Our main purpose is to help area directors prepare to IESG telechat. And equal important is our role to in improving the overall quality of documents. Our main key tasks include reviewing routing area drafts as they go through IETF as the call, and review other routing related drafts and IETF as the call, and providing early feedback on routing area working group documents before they reach working group last call. For more details, please visit the RTG Director Charters on Wiki. And let's look at some brief statistics. Since IETF 118, RTG Directory have completed 143 reviews, including 77 early reviews and 76 last call reviews. Since IETF 121, 52 there are 52 reviews with 23 early reviews and 29 last call reviews. The total, the amount of the reviews since IETF 121 is nearly equal to the average numbers of the reviews since IETF 180. The top working group reviews are MPS, IDR, and BIAS. These reviews have been very helpful in identifying issues, providing constructive feedbacks, and ensuring that drafts are ready for publications. Thanks to all the directories for their hard work and dedications. And this on the left chart, on the left chart is the results of the RTGAREA drafts. The data is so small. And nearly there are 22% were ready, and 29% had needs, and 32% had issues. 70% were not ready. On the left is the result of non-RTGAREA drafts. Half of the drafts were ready, and 14% drafts were had needs, and 29% drafts had issues, and 7% were not ready. And RTG Directory maintains a record of reviewers' experience and interests in routing protocol and technologies on Wiki. These documentations guide assignment decisions to assure that each draft is reviewed by the most appropriate person. And
just to make a comment there. So if you are on the directorate, this is, I just want to underline that. Please go in there, check what skills it currently shows. I'm sure there's a bunch of skills on there that you've forgotten about 15 years ago. And there's a bunch of skills that you currently have that are not on there. So please go there, because it really helps us to hone in on the right people to do the reviews of the documents for us, and we'd appreciate that.
And false modesty is not helpful.
Right.
The process matches experience with draft requirements and review availabilities. To optimize the review assignment, it's crucial to keep reviews, appearance, and interests up to date. So please, the reviewers are encouraged to self-update your information via RTG Director Wiki, and additional RTG Director leadership are scheduling an online RTG meeting to discuss RTG director operations and the possible process improvements. So please actively participate. That's all. Thank you.
Before you go. So any questions from the floor? Adrian.
Hello, ADs. I'm Adrian. It's a nice report. I like numbers. I like charts. Something that seems to spring out of it is that other areas don't often ask for routing directorate reviews. You as ADs see all of those documents that come through, and you get to review them during IESG approval. Do you think that more of those would benefit from routing directorate reviews? And if so, what can we do to encourage other areas to do those early reviews?
Go ahead.
We talked among ourselves about this a few weeks ago and sort of concluded, number one, a lot of them don't need routing review. You know, like a lot of the stuff from Art just doesn't need our directorate to spend their time on it. Number two, some clearly could benefit from routing review and don't get it. And number three, we definitely took an action item to figure out what the heck to do about that. And by we, I mean these three and not me. So I'm sure that they would appreciate any, you know, concrete suggestions from the floor or later, but that's as far as we've gotten. Does that sound like a fair summary?
Yeah. I know. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, not really to add anything to the question from Adrian here, but I just want to point out again like how thankful we are as ADs for all the great work that the routing directorate is doing. It really helps us, a lot in reviewing documents. So, and the director secretaries, for assigning them, and yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you all for contributing. And one thing, what we will do also, so one more thing. So what we will do also somewhere in the coming weeks is try to understand better how your experience is with the routing directorate, how we can do the assignments better, how we can, provide feedback better, in a more structured way, because from what you're seeing right now, for example, it has been quite a while since we have given like a routing directorate feedback, session from this perspective to really show you the great work what we've been doing, because in essence, we're doing about 12, routing directorate reviews a month, which is quite a lot. So, and for that, we want to optimize, the best way of doing that to understand, if we are overloading you, if you want to have like way more, reviews in your queue, all those things can happen with great pleasure.
Yep. Okay, next up, I believe is Ketan to talk about document quality. Is that correct? Yep. Okay, you are up. That's not the slides.
Okay. Okay. So this is about, yeah, I can see that well. So that's fine. Yeah. That's good. Thank you. So this is about improving quality of documents. On this slide, there is nothing new. It's more of a reminder, and that's the first bullet. That's reviews is the most important thing. There are some really low-hanging fruits, like spell check, grammar check, readability, ambiguous languages. And we have some really great tools available. When I say available, it does not necessarily have to be in IETF, but out there as well. I'm not calling what those tools are, but everybody here knows about them. The earlier that this happens in the document cycle, it would be better, because we want really more technical review, and spell check, grammar errors could prove to be distraction for at least some of the reviewers. So please request for everybody, even at the individual document state, see how you can help that. Then comes the important part about the real, like a technical review, and it would be good to know if the document has gone a line by line review by somebody outside the author team, of course, and the working group chair or shepherd has others in the working group really done an in-depth review, especially for protocol specifications that are often most of our documents. There are two ways to look at them. One is from the lens of an implementer, the person who is going to code it up, and from a view of an operator who is going to deploy and operate it. Both viewpoints are really important and valuable. And if you could get at least one or each, that would be really awesome. Finally, we do introduce new protocols, we do introduce new protocols today, but extensions as well. And some of them have important considerations. Security comes top, but also ops and other intersection areas. So there are other directorates that are able to help the document while it is still in the working group stage and provide early feedback. So this one is
Just before you go there.
yeah.
So Tony, I see you're in the queue. Do you want to ask your question now or?
Yeah. Oh.
I actually would just want to plug, I want to second the comment about spell and grammar checkers. I want to plug Grammarly or Microsoft Word or ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. Any of these will improve your text. And if you are not a native English speaker, please consider this a requirement. It's not that we have any problems with what you're doing. It's just there are lots of things that are easy to iron out. And humans are, tough to come by. For those of us who work in big companies that have formal documentation writers, feel free to use other people in your company. That's what they're there for.
Thanks a lot for bringing all of that up. We didn't want to say anything from up here. Okay, the next is, this is also a reminder, there should not be anything new here normally, but maybe we are not following everything consistently across all the working groups. So, the process starts from the working group document adoption, and you have the usual reviews and checks that happen at adoption time. But there is also one aspect which you'd like to bring up is when the working group chairs before adoption have gone through the document, likely there is an idea about what are the other working groups or within routing or outside of routing that may have an interest or that may have the expertise. The second part, expertise, is more important. Feel free to cross-post the working group adoption calls to those other groups and invite them to review the documents. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I actually would be a little stronger on that as well. One of the things that we've noticed as a group is that certainly that cross collaboration between the different working groups is maybe not as strong as it should be. And I've personally had documents coming into my queue, and I'm scratching my head why that hasn't been run by LSR, for example. So please, as you're going through this, do consider, what other working groups might either be interested in this or have the expertise to actually make it a better document. And the earlier that's done, the less problems we need to deal with at the end of the process, and therefore, speed up the time it takes to get these documents through the whole process.
Yeah, and adoption and the working group last call is another stage to do it. This is asked in the Shepherd's report as well, so it's part of the process. The other thing about this would be that working group last calls typically last for 2 weeks. Of course, sometimes they are extended, but that also puts a kind of a timeline on other groups to review and provide their feedback in a timely manner, that things don't get blocked or in a dependency wait between working groups. So that would also help improve things. While at some point in the document cycle, when there is a case for early allocations, that may be a good time to consider leveraging a routing directorate early review, because the documents are considered more or less stable and in a good enough state that we could allocate code points. Maybe, it's considered something to consider. At the start of working group last call, this is a good place to ask for early directorate reviews. You could do it right during the working group last call, probably the preferable one. And that will help give inputs on other aspects like security, for example. Once the working group last call is done, the working group consensus has been established to proceed, comments have been addressed. That's the time when some years ago we had a change in process where the routing ADs have asked for the chairs to issue a routing directorate last call review on behalf of the AD. This is to make sure that the routing directorate has reviewed and provide comments and close them before the working group's chair push this and send this to the ISG for publication. This just helps avoid any major gotchas in the document before the AD review itself. This is still with the working group at this stage, right? And so anything can be fixed within the working group in a much more lightweight manner than if it comes to the AD. Once the publication has been requested, then the responsible AD reviews it, we iterate over whatever comments are there, and then the IETF last call is there. If everything is addressed and we are okay. So along with those, the last call is when the other directorates may schedule their reviews, and then the rest of the process is pretty much the same, but focus was more on the earlier phase, and this is more of a reiteration, a reminder for the major review milestones, and something for the work for the area everybody to look at and also provide inputs or feedback on this. Any things you want to add? Okay. So the last one, and this is really the routing directorate process. The only one change here is that a routing directorate review happens, and then the document is either declared ready or ready with nits or not ready. If it is not ready, then the routing directorate reviewer and the authors and the working group go into a mode where there is a mail thread discussions and all of that. What we are adding newly is that after that is done and the working group chairs are satisfied, that they ask for another review, which will go to the same reviewer, and the result of that will be captured. This is just to have tracking in the data tracker that what was the first set of comments and what is the final stage. So we would get a ready most cases on the data tracker, so we know that the review has done. Otherwise, it's difficult to chase and find out what happened there. So that's all. Any questions? Okay.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Dhruv. I'm on the IB. IB are the folks with the red dots on the badges, just in case there are a couple of them in the room. And we'll talk about some of the IB activities and maybe most importantly, invite you to come and participate in some of the IB activities. So for the folks who might be new, what's IB? Well, IB is Internet Architecture Board. The name is really nice. It gives you sound really important. We provide long-term technical direction. We provide architectural oversight. We don't have a specific say in the standard process, but we do act as a source of advice and discussions and work well with the ISG over various things, especially, for instance, BOF, that is bringing new work into the IETF. We also work very closely with the ISOC. We have a good liaison relationship with ISOC, and we do various different activities. For instance, in the IAB Open, there was a specific session on WCS plus 20 and IGF and things like that. The interesting parts are the technical work, like organizing workshop, technical programs. Those are the one which is kind of fun. And there is a lot more things that are like, appointments and interviews and lots of those works as well. So it's a mixed bag. Let's talk about the workshop, which is kind of a thing that I enjoyed the most on the IAB activities. Last year, we have had around 3 workshops. It's been a pretty productive year as far as the workshops are concerned. What are them? Well, the idea is to get the right set of people in a room with a very focused problem, and let's have more in-depth discussions than sometimes what are possible in IETF or IRTF as a venue, where we have an agenda and milestones and discussions, and there's only a limited time that we can give on a particular topic. But some discussions, we need much more in-depth discussion, and that's where the workshops could be a possible venue for us to do that. So we addressed challenges, explore emerging technologies. The impact could be on an IETF work or IRTF work. Mainly is to understand the problem better, so that everybody in the room understands each other better, because we had chance to go over things in much more detail than sometimes is possible in other venues. And hopefully that helps the IETF community, IRTF community. It doesn't have any special say in our process. This is just a way for us to spark better in-depth conversations within our community. The format, it could be any topic related to internet architecture and operational issues. It should be relevant to our community. That's the main thing. We don't make it a complete open participation, but the participation is very easy by sending your position paper, so that we want people to be prepared. We don't want just a series of presentations during the workshops. So that's why we ask for position papers. We request people to read those position papers and come prepared to take part in an active discussion. We also allow expressions of interest. Sometimes people are, for instance, during the latest workshop that we did reached out to operators and say, we want you in the room, even though you don't have a particular position paper to give. But the participation was just providing us with an email request that, yes, this sounds interesting. I have this interest on this area and this experience. I want to participate. And that was completely okay. So it's very low bar, but not at the same time. We did not want a full participation, because recordings are made available. Anybody who doesn't have things to say can actually look through our workshop reports, workshop recordings at a later stage. At the workshop, we want active engagement, and that's what we focus on. The hope is that it could lead to much more better understanding on technical topics that needs a lot more in-depth discussions. The hope is that within the workshop, we can come up with some actionable next steps, some conclusions that, again, it's only within the workshop. What the folks said, that doesn't have any big say on the IETF or IRTF. It has no special values, but it's an input to the standard process or the research process going ahead. So that's our aim. The list of the workshops that we have done recently, we finished the AnyMops workshop, which is on network management operations. We had lot of participation from operations, as well as some people in the room who have routing experience as well. And since we know that within our area, we do take part in a lot of work related to Yank and NetConf and RESTConf and things like that. So this was one of the last IAB workshops. We had a workshop on AI control, which has also led to creation of AI preference working group. So this, you can see a direct result of conversation that happened in the workshop. And why it was critical, because during this workshop, we were able to invite people who are otherwise missing in IETF as such, which is policy folks, content folks, especially with respect to a problem like AI preference. So we needed those voices, and workshop is a good format to bring them in. We had a workshop on barriers to internet access and service, bias workshop. The RFC for workshop report recently got published. Similarly, we did for environmental impact. And as we know, there are various working groups and research groups in this area already spawning out of it. So that's about the workshops. We also have technical programs. The technical programs are basically our idea of raising awareness and discussion on a specific concern from the community, which needs long-term discussion, doesn't fit neatly into a working group or a research group yet, needs a home for it to develop a little bit more. So an example of that is e-impact, which started with the workshop and then led to much more in-depth and smaller scale problem in green working group and sustain RG. And in fact, now there is a conversation of like, it has done its work and maybe it's time for it to wind down. So these conversations are happening. EDM is another technical program that's long continuing. So those are the two ones that we have as of now. And if you look at our history, there were a lot more IAB programs that we have done in the past to get you an idea of what they look like. The idea behind them is they can just a way for us to organize ourselves, have side meetings, discussion, interims. So just think about whether technical programs is something that makes sense for any of our topics in the routing area as well. New work, I think our role at the IAB is basically to provide any help. We take part in the BOF coordination call. When the BOF happens, we are there in the room, usually covering or shepherding, sometimes working much more closely with the BOF proponents, sometimes just giving our feedback back to the ISG when they are making the decision whether this working group should be chartered within ITF. We sometimes even lurk your side meetings to try and figure out what is happening, but that's at our individual capacity, not in our IAB role. We have a help desk. So if you have new work, we did one on Tuesday. There is one on Thursday as well in the morning. So if you want to discuss with the IAB, there will be a bunch of people at the registration, at the new work help desk. Come and talk to us. And my final slide, are there any interest from this community? Is there a workshop topic, technical programs, something that could work as an IB stream, RFCs? In general, any architectural concerns that you guys care about that needs broader input not just from folks within our area, but also from outside the area. IB could be a good venue for us to reach out, and we can help you figure it out. What's the next step? There are folks from the routing area on the IAB, some of our past ADs, there are current chairs. So you have folks who understand the needs. Come and talk to us, and hopefully we can use this also as a vehicle to do more work within IETF and IRTF. Thank you. No questions? No questions.
Afternoon, everybody. To some people's disappointment, this is not lessons learned. Somewhat to the prior presentation about pipelining of things, this is actually about analyzing things before you get started. So this talk is about doing various things for control plane protocols over QUIC. So for control plane protocols in IETF, we started off with TCP. When we had our conversations with Yakov years ago about why did you choose Note for BGP, it's like, well, it was there at the time. He didn't have to actually invent anything himself, and made things a lot easier for him. Does it mean that he thought it was a good idea? Well, it meant he had to do less work, and all the stuff that we found out about how these protocols behave over TCP over the years were hard lessons learned, unfortunately. Things we generally do care about, though, is that it's a streaming protocol, it's reliable, and for the most part, we just care that those two properties hold. I've done BGP over Unix domain socket, TLS SSH, basically anything that can deliver it, back-to-back. Files, as an example, is another popular thing. People that are familiar with like the MRT format will recognize this. The motivation for this talk is the people in this room, are possibly attending other working groups across this IETF, or seeing stuff on the mailing list that things over QUIC has gotten attention. For my own part, I'm co-author on a draft trying to actually make use of QUIC for BGP, and I'll comment a little bit about why we've done that. But the motivations that are seen in these other drafts are slightly different than the one that I chose. But since these things are popping up more and more, it seemed worth saying, here's at least what we're thinking about why QUIC is interesting, and some of the gotchas we found just at the front end on doing analysis for the protocol. The thing that people usually come to when they're talking about QUIC is the speed. It's faster in TCP, it's more responsive, it has zero setup, considerations that can be potentially interesting. For most of our control plane protocols, we don't care about any of those things. Our control plane protocols don't exchange a lot of data. We generally send less than a cat video's worth of information across the protocol. And the consequences, it just doesn't matter. We're really CPU bound in terms of how we're actually exercising the connection rather than the IO itself. So what does that mean? Why would you care about anything else? Something that has caught some people's attention is authentication and to some extent privacy. QUIC does use TLS 1.3. This means that encryption is a built-in piece of the recipe, which means you get things as some people like and some people are terrified of, certificates. So many people in this room have probably been at the wrong end of a certificate expiring. What does that mean for your control plane protocol? I didn't pay my TLS certificate provider to keep my BGP session up. That sounds like a terrible idea. What I found interesting and what has driven a lot of my participation with Alvaro and Yingzhen on the BGP over QUIC one is the fact that QUIC does have streams. If we take our OSI layer cake that we're traditionally taught in school, and some of you may have actually been around and actually have implemented at some point, layer 5 is our session layer. This is the place that normally gives us things that look like streams and framing. We don't get framing out of QUIC, which would have been actually just as interesting for every person in this room that's wanting to do a control plane protocol, so we can stop worrying about where my boundaries and my PDUs are. But at the very least, it means we can actually split things across multiple bits of information across a single transport. And if you're using something like BGP, where you have lots of different kinds of information that you want to have slightly different treatments, being able to do that separation without spinning up multiple instances of TCP with all the headaches that involves is interesting. What we're seeing out of some of the drafts that are going through IETF is there's a little bit of interest in using the streams for something clever. The BMP is a good example, but for the most part, this is not the thing we're generally seeing. What this means as an interesting headache, though, is if we actually start considering this an attractive property, we now have an incentive that the protocol itself that we're trying to actually send over QUIC might actually start diverging if we decide that it needs more than one transport. Foo over anything that's stream reliable sequence related means that you can just put it over anything else. Something that goes over streams as your primary property means you need something else that has streams. Another clever thing that QUIC can do is session resumption. For those of us who are dealing with control plane protocols that take a long time to converge, and temporary interruptions are somewhat terrifying in terms of impact to operators, being able to get a temporary disconnect, connect again and not actually have lost your session state, this is actually a lovely thing. So this is perhaps a useful thing for many of our places where we would be interested in making use of Quick. Challenges, like I said, I haven't written a single line of Quick yet, and a lot of this actually comes down to just free time, this traditional problem for a lot of us. We have seen, out in the field, a lot of reports, and I think there was a whiteboard presentation a few IETFs back for people who have just said, well, I've run BGP over Quick, and it works perfectly fine, and they just used a single stream to do the job. They got a 15% performance bonus because TCP sucks in some circumstances. Well, whoop-de-doo, it's like once you're converged, it's not a big deal. The headaches that we run into, though, is how do you actually get this stuff into a stack you're likely to make use of? For Quick, you're seeing an awful lot of user land implementations. Primarily that's because how things got started. Quick does run over UDP, and that means that you can run application space, but it also means that you have to have your program able to listen to all this UDP coming on and doing its job. Clearly, we live in a land where user land can make use of threading and other things that allow us to get CPU for these sorts of things. But it also means that if you're at the other end of an ecosystem that is dealing with potentially a lot of scale, different than high scale you get from web servers, well, then maybe this is a tad bit harder. What we also are seeing is that some of the implementations are popping up at the kernels, and this is actually very important. The vast majority of the people that are working on these protocols, people in this room as an example, we don't actually want to worry about having to implement this stuff or tighten our software. We want to just open up a socket and start draining data. Unfortunately, that means what's our next headache? There is no standardized API. I started doing this stuff after POSIX had largely gotten done doing its job and making things like TCP incredibly easy to use. I could walk over to my bookshelf, pull off a copy of Stevens, and here's how I could actually use TCP. If I walk over to the pile of stuff that comes from the internet for Quick, from Google, it's going to say, here's a dozen different APIs. Good luck with that. And having not lived through the actual Quick working group, this was a feature that was being sold. They wanted to actually specify what the protocol did, and the API was sort of left up to implementers. This makes deploying things a little bit tricky. One of the other headaches is that the traffic is coming through a black box, and the side effect is that potentially can impair your traffic shaping. One of the properties that Quick was being designed for is hiding a lot of things. And when you're in TLS land and you're actually doing things for web security, that's a lovely thing. Anybody who's in this room that sat through a debugging session for a protocol and says, I'm just going to fire up TCP dump and see what the other guy is doing wrong, because of course it's them, not me. Well, good luck with that one too. We have to get a TCP dump that is able to intercept and man in the middle the TLS session. Such things do exist, but they are somewhat painful. Speaking of painful for exactly that reason, various vendors have implementations of things called nonstop routing. And that involves man-in-the-middling the software and getting your basically allowing the backup to take over when things go wrong. I don't know if the Quick working group's working on something that can allow this. This is something that my own homework is terrible. Last comment, in terms of implementation, just from a challenge at the whiteboard level, pacing of the consumption of the streams is left up to the implementers. If you're going to use multiple streams and you're a protocol designer trying to actually decide what this looks like those of us doing BGP or Quick are doing, most of our pacing for these things in TCP land is created by you pushing selective data at the head of the queues. In the case of Quick, you have more than one queue and they can be selectively drained by the receiver. So as part of our specifications, we're going to be a lot clearer about who sends hard and who receives hard on which connections.
Can I quickly jump in? Hey, great talk so far, Lars. I got just want to on the TCP dump point. Most stacks let you set the SSL keylog environment variable, which gets you the keys for a session, which you can feed into Wireshark, and you can decrypt it so you don't need a proxy in the middle, which is awkward. I agree. And question, could you elaborate a little bit for the non-routing people in the room on this non-stop routing? Because I don't quite know what you mean by that. Thanks.
So assuming I'm not going to blow over our time too much, I'll spend a moment. Okay, great. So hitting both of your points. So one of the lovely things about TCP that drives the TCP working group a little bit crazy about things like BGP, our peering sessions stay up for months. As a side effect, this means that you want to be able to fire up TCP dump and just grab things. Exactly as you're saying, you can man-in-the-middle TLS by grabbing stuff up front, but what this means for doing this as a planned procedure, you'd have to basically leave around a bit of security important credentials on the box in a persistent form, just so that they can be picked up for those purposes. So yeah, and since they're long-lived and these things are important for the routing of the internet, that's a little scary. I don't have any solutions here, just stating this is a challenge. The other piece I talk about for nonstop routing, it's very common to have redundant control plane elements, a primary and a backup system. And what this means is that you have to actually run the full loop of TCP through both systems to send every single packet. To do the same sort of thing in Quick, you need to be able to look inside the black box of the state. So part of it is actually exchanging and keeping the TLS state so that you can take a look at the data.
You might want to look at carrying the stuff over HTTP, which has a whole set of richer semantics. Yeah! But this is why it's a comment that I don't expect any reaction from the audience. But so Quick might not give you what you need. I get it.
Yep. And to be fair, it's like I've done just enough of my homework to know that Quick is just really scrape it a little bit. It's just an HTTP light in many respects. So and I'm not bothered by this as much as everybody else is. The terrifying things are already here. You just haven't looked under the covers enough. So this is all learning experience. And again, the whole point of this, it's like why we're here. I've been doing homework and we're seeing a bunch of other people, doing stuff, and people are going to start writing code potentially before I write my first line. This is more to bring attention to the routing area that this stuff is starting to happen. It's starting to happen in a lot of groups. For the most part, control plane developers don't want to be bothered with these details. And I've had more than a few conversations like Stephen Farrell when he was security AD of, good God, why don't you actually do good security for all this stuff? It's like, well, we have these things in our toolbox. If they give us security, great, but it's not something we're going to be writing ourselves. So we need to have it in the toolbox. And to some extent, we've been sort of living with the fact that Yakov and company years ago, just made this choice of we have this TCP thing and it works well enough. The side effect, unfortunately, is we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about transport for control plane protocols. Aside from knowing TCP quirks, we're going to have to be thinking about these things a lot more once we crack open this box. And part of the thing that I'm seeing out of the document set that is starting to use these things is that there are mistakes in there that we sort of have walked our own way through for doing BGP over Quick. Other people are going to be finding these things themselves as they do the work. It probably makes sense for us to come up with some common transport profile things for control planes that we can all use to cover the caveats. And that at that point, we can spend the actual portion of the document we care about worrying less about what are all these little setup things that everybody cares about, and more about how does BGP use streams that do this stuff. And this is going to do things like make our ADs happy because if we've gone through these considerations, ideally it means we're not coming back and having this conversation every single time. That is the talk.
And there are some questions. Tom.
Good day. This was an extremely informative talk, so thank you very much, Jeff, for giving it. I really appreciate this because it spoke very plainly about a situation that I've long seen as, I think, a race to implement the new shiny in any way possible. Get those drafts in now. I wanted to make a quick point about the encryption kind of part that you mentioned around Quick and the fact it includes encryption. You probably know this, but for the benefit of everyone else, we have a wonderful thing called the Telecom Security Act in the UK, and it has this brilliant piece of text in it that says you should use encrypted protocols. And fundamentally, that actually means that we need to care about certificate management and encryption with TCP as well as Quick.
Right.
And this is, for every single management protocol, in theory, it's quite salubrious with its language. So, yeah, I wanted to kind of just make sure that we raise this point because certificate management in routers is pretty poor.
It's terrifyingly bad.
Right? And that's not any vendor in particular. It seems to be a lot. The mobile networks have had this going on for a very long time, and there's some absolute horrible war stories of things taking down entire networks. So, yeah, I guess a plea to everyone involved is, let's not wait for Quick to be able to do certificate management and encryption. But, yeah.
Right, I want to hit 2 points in response to you. The first one is, yes, a lot of people are playing with this. One of the things I'm finding a little bothersome out of this is, people are obviously doing copy and paste of different ideas with partial levels of, thinking about what they're grabbing. This is one of the reasons why moving the templates would be nice. Not so much worried about idea squatting. I'm just more about let's actually do this right collectively. That's what IETF is good for. Second piece for your security, portions for certificates. You're absolutely correct. Certificate management's terrible at the best of times, and what we have available on routers is a little bit worse. Ideally, on the benefit side of things, this may give us things like using something like Acme to be able to do provisioning. I had a conversation earlier about maybe using TPM as a seeding thing for an Acme transaction. There's apparently some work over there to do that. Having that sort of thing means you might be able to ZTP your router that's going to be plugging in, being like a BGP fabric switch as an example. So this might actually make some operations nicer over the long term and in a nice secure fashion. But the rest of it, especially when we get to the inter-provider stuff, will become very challenging. And I suspect we will see at least some of this conversation bubble up in RPKI as well.
Yeah, and I expect the conversation about TCP/AO to come back as well at some point. I haven't started it yet, but yeah,
Exactly.
Good fun. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so we are running out of time, so
Yeah.
just make it quick, please.
So Mike Bishop.
He just had to get that in, didn't he?
Yes, of course. Couple things to call to your attention, and one that I would like to understand a little bit better. So the first piece, you had said that you kind of wish that Quick had given you the PDU boundaries as well. So the streams in Quick are extremely ephemeral, and one model of using them is to use a stream per message. And so, yeah, so then, yeah, there are mappings that do that with a unidirectional stream. So you can do that, but then there's no ordering guarantee between the streams. There's also some discussion, you're talking about things being built for Quick and TCP diverging. There was a presentation today in Quick, but it probably doesn't belong in that working group ultimately, about having a mapping layer on top of TCP that would have a stream-based API, stream-based interface over a TCP stream. So you get kind of compatibility mode. So from one of my colleagues that works more with BGP and router sessions, I know those long-standing connections do seem like they're a challenge for Quick, because there are several things in the protocol that cap out at 2 to the 62, which, kind of a 640K should be enough for everybody. When the working group was designing it, 2 to the 62 felt nearly infinite. But if you have a months-long or years-long BGP session up, I imagine you can run that out. And I would love to know exactly what those timescales are, and is there a number that would be practically infinite, or do we actually need some kind of rollover and reset to 0?
Oh, so going to your comment about the 2 to the 62, much like the comment about, space is big, really big, you don't know how big it actually is. 2 to the 62 is a terrifyingly large number, and for an application like BGP that expects to be up potentially for years, it's probably fine. But that's because the way we're looking at solving the problem for at least BGP over Quick is very similar to what we have for TCP. Using a stream per PDU is not what we're looking to do, simply because we have application that's stream per address family, which is going to be on the order of dozens rather than anything much larger than that. We're also very concerned, or at least I am, having done some API research, that the management of each individual stream, even though it makes it very easy to set up and tear down in Quick, means that you have basically your case select type implementation to be able to pull stuff across the different streams becomes potentially a gigantic challenge in order to actually sync things up. I'm happy to talk about this more offline.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to interrupt. We're out of time, but clearly these talks are of great interest. And thank you, Jeff. I found that extremely interesting. Yeah.
Sorry, I wonder if this is worth having a side meeting or, a barb off or something. It does seem like you've, caught some interest, and maybe it would be good to keep running with it.
Yep, I'm happy to help with that. Thanks for the time.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the week. What does it do?
And I do have a jacket.